Welcome to another episode of Seeds of Tomorrow. Today, we journey to Spain to understand the cultivation of plant variety rights from a national perspective. We have the pleasure to have with us Antonio Villarreal, the Secretary General of the Asociación Nacional des Obtenteurs Vegetales, or Anove, in Spain. Good morning, Antonio.
Good morning.
And in studio with us, Francesco Mattina, President of the CPVO. Good morning, Francesco.
Good morning, everyone.
Antonio, can you give us an overview of what Anove does, what Anove is, and what's your mission?
Yeah, thank you. Well, as you mentioned, Anove is the association representing the interest of the plant breeders here in Spain. The association currently has 62 members, of which 59 are private companies and 3 are public research centers. Because I would like to underline that the association is completely horizontal, is present in all crops through 4 different sections: vegetables and ornamentals, cereals and food crops, field crops, and fruits. And also incorporate companies of all profiles and sizes, from large international companies to cooperatives, family business, etc. And our members currently, this is something also I would like to underline, have 63 research and development centers in Spain, which makes our country one of the most active in the area of plant breeding.
And I see that in your website, you have, you and your partners, you have a very large share of the market with the variety that you are protecting. I see 99% of the articles, and 90% of the sweet fruit, and 85% of the red fruits that are put on the market in Spain came from your partners. This is quite something.
That's correct. Yeah. That is, we are very proud of that because the association is still pretty young. We started our activities in 2005. So I mean that we are less than still a teenager. So, but so we
You're growing.
Yeah, exactly. So we have, but we are very proud of that. Yes.
Antonio, you mentioned that you have 73 innovation centers, if I may say so. And I keep seeing in the news a lot of Spanish research aimed at or geared at getting the best out of this extreme weather condition that we are witnessing. How do you see it in this context, especially in Spain? Because I see a lot of grapevines, a lot of other fruits that are where there is this surge of research in order to get fruits that can withstand these conditions.
That's true. And well, as you know, Spain is a large country, but it's also with many different agroclimatic areas, from the north area, which has fully the Atlantic weather, to the center, which is very continental weather with long and cold winters and dry and summers. And then you have also all the Mediterranean coast, which is with some droughts and very Mediterranean weather. That's also is a challenge, but it's also from plant breeding perspective is an opportunity and an advantage, because some are saying here in Spain that Spain is becoming a kind of a lab to say and trial the impact of climate change in agriculture and in plant breeding. So we see that as an opportunity.
And from the perspective of the CPVO, I could also add that we have a lot of testing stations in different regions of the country because of what Antonio was saying of the different agroclimatic conditions in the different regions. We are able to test a lot of crops, different crops in different regions of the country, from the north, the center, and the south, and even some tropical species such as, for example, mangoes and avocado in the region of Malaga.
So we're moving northern the crops that we can test because of climate change, and then Spain plays a crucial role here because of this diversity in weather. This is what you're saying as well, Antonio?
Exactly, exactly. This is changing, but we have to keep in mind that climate change, the trend of climate change is not really clear. So, which is already is that there is a general global warming. That means that it's more warm, but this is not linear. That it doesn't mean that we have 2 more degrees every day of the year. What we are seeing, at least in the Mediterranean area, is a clear destabilization, changes in trends, changes in patterns. That means that one year could be extremely dry with long droughts, but the next year could be completely different. As we are seeing, for example, half of the Spain is under a very severe drought, but the other half is, let's say, more the rain than usual. So that means that we have to develop varieties that are also more resilient, more adaptable, and could deal with those changes in the coming years. Because what it's completely clear is that the varieties that we have been using for the last years are not going to be the same in the coming years. So we have to very quickly adapt and develop and breed those new varieties in the coming years.
When you say very quickly, it means the pace has accelerated in the light of this, and I suppose that also all the research is keeping up with this. Do you see any particular venue that are exploited more than it was in the past just because of that, or it is an overall gain of speed in terms of research and being able to put on the market the species that are the most apt to be resilient, to withstand these changes?
Well, what we are seeing is that there is a rise of new technologies. So science is providing us a better and deeper understanding of plant genomes and how those the genes are interacting with environments. So this is definitely an extremely good opportunity. It's a powerful tool, but on the other hand, it is also a challenge, particularly from a regulatory perspective, but also from IP perspective.
When you say regulatory perspective, you mean a Spain perspective, European one?
European. I'm trying to talk at European level here.
Where you would like to see the legislation going in terms of how to better serve the purpose of having a new varieties developed easily, faster, and able to reach a wider public?
Well, we have a very good example with a new regulation on NGT, on new new genomic techniques that has been proposed, drafted by the Commission, and already approved by the European Parliament, but is still pending on the Council decision. Yes. Well, there's not reached the majority. And for us, as now talking as plant-breeded sector as a whole, this is a crucial project because we have also to realize that in Europe, we are not alone. And in many other parts of the world, and they are taking a much more, I would say, technology-friendly approach in the regulation. So that means that we are going to, if this regulation is not finally approved and going ahead, and we continue with the current status, where all the varieties developed by those new techniques are considered as GMO, genetically modified organisms, and then they have an extremely lengthy and expensive regulatory process to come to the market. And if we are not moving ahead with that and facilitating for breeders the adoption of those technology, definitely we risk losing, let's say, losing the train and placing our farmers, and not only our breeders, but also our farmers, in a very disadvantageous position.
Indeed, because often enough, what you hear from the associations of the people against NGTs is that this is going to open the door to GMOs. Do you have any plan to get the right message across to the public to explain this in detail in simple terms? Because I fully realize that it's easier to cry GMOs, but it's a bit more complex to get people understand that in fact it is not GMOs at all.
Yeah, we are touching a very, very crucial question, and because I don't think that it's this challenge of making plant breeding, and here I would talk plant breeding as a whole, and not only breeding with the most modern technologies.
Mhm.
We have really challenged in making ourselves much more visible and much more understandable by the society, by the consumers, by the stakeholders. And this is show that it has become the top priority, a strategic priority, I would say, not only for Anove in Spain, but also for the plant breeding sector worldwide, and for sure also at European level within Eurocids, the association that's represent our industry at European level. And that communication is absolutely key. And unfortunately, I think that this is we are partly responsible for that,
What do
because
you mean?
for many years we have been a bit perhaps shy and thinking that consumer society would be really interested in what we are doing. Definitely is no longer the case. So I think that this is our responsibility now, our first responsibility, I would say, it is to be much more transparent, much more open, and much more active in communicating to the society what we are doing, how we are doing, and what are the benefits we obtain. Because plant breeding, this is something that I always repeat, is basically is the heart of agriculture. Agriculture started 10,000 years ago when the first proto farmers start selecting plant varieties. This is the agriculture, and the only difference is that with understanding genetics, development of science, we have been much more efficient in doing so, and then in making that progress. And entities are not nothing different, and that is just providing us with a much more precise and efficient tool to obtain results. Results, by the way, this is really important, that could be obtained naturally, because those mutations could happen naturally in the plants, but and in provoking those very targeted small changes in the plants, we can obtain same results that with the traditional plant breeding methods, but in a much more accurate and quick way.
I would add that the same challenge in terms of giving visibility to the system of protection of new plant varieties through the plant breeders' rights system, which is, for example, like in the European Union, let's say, region managed by the CPVO, so the Community Plant Variety Rights System. This same challenge is also for the office, for the agency, because traditionally the plant variety rights system is seen as a minor intellectual property rights system when you compare with the so-called big broader, so patents, for example, or even trademarks. And not only from the perspective of the public, but also sometimes from within the sector. And we have to continue our efforts in making understanding that a seed is a concentration of high technology, and there is even a higher investment in research and development in plant breeding. And Antonio could give us some numbers in terms of investment that is done by the breeding companies in producing new varieties, which is among the highest in comparison to other industries?
Antonio, you mentioned before that indeed the world is taking a more technologically friendly approach to plant variety. Do you have a direct experience of what's happening in other areas of the world other than Spain or Europe?
Yes, for sure. And what we see is that the regulatory landscape has evolved significantly over the past years. And nowadays, what we see is that only in 2 countries worldwide, South Africa and New Zealand, are taking an approach that is, could say, hostile to those new technologies, or extending the so-called precautionary principle too far. On the other side, we see that most of America, from North America, Canada, most Latin American countries to Australia, India, African countries, Russia, China, UK, are taking a much more technology-friendly approach and in adopting those technologies, which, by the way, is fully aligned what scientists, academic circles, etc., are always insisting, is that there is no scientific basis for discrimination on those technologies, because those technologies are indistinguishable of natural mutations that could occur spontaneously in nature. So there is absolutely no further risk associated with those technologies compared with natural mutation or with the traditional breeding methods.
Antonio, what is your perspective on the importance of safeguarding the breeder exemption, also considering the impact of new technologies, as you said?
Well, breeder's exception, which is, as you know, the base of the UPO system, is extremely important. It's because this is what defines the collaborative environment with accumulative efforts. That is the very base of the UPO system. That's why we call it an open system. We compare with other IP rights like patents. Nevertheless, what we see is some challenges here, and because those technologies are reshaping our industry. And what we are seeing, and this is the main concern, especially for small family breeders that have been engaged for many years in crossing, selecting varieties, they are seeing the rise of a new kind of breeders, which are biotech companies, not necessarily big biotech companies, because those techniques and those technologies are quite affordable. So, but which is peculiar of those biotech companies that are companies without germplasm. So they are specialized in these technologies. Then they could take the germplasm which is in the market. Then they could enhance it genetically. And the problem of the risk facing the small breeders, that the germplasms could quickly lose the value. And then they could be completely naked without capacity to respond to those to that appropriation. So it's for that the concept of EDBs, essentially derived varieties, is crucial here. And what we need, or the breeders need, really a kind of protection that's in front of these new models. And I have to say that this is to be one of the main challenges of the UPOP system, and particularly of the community plant variety right system in the next future.
A step back. What is ADV? You just mentioned essentially derived variety, but what it is in layman terms?
Well, essentially, derived varieties is a concept that was introduced in the plant variety right system by the UPOP convention in 1991. And the idea behind this concept is that breeders that could take, because of the breeder exemption, which is one of the pillars of the system, could take varieties already in the market from competitors, and then they can use it for crossing, selecting, etc., and developing new varieties, but assuming that they have performed, let's say, through a breeding process. But nevertheless, some technologies, including mutations, but also genetical engineering, etc., could introduce changes and improve some existing varieties, making use of the major part of the genome of those varieties, but nevertheless enhancing them with some changes. And those cases are mentioned as typical examples of what could be an EDB. Nevertheless, and this is a very personal opinion, as an opinion of mine, I'm not talking here on behalf of my association or the plant breeder sector. I think that's the concept is a very good idea. It's clear in the goals, but nevertheless, the way it is worded in both UPOP and the community plant variety rights legislation is not very clear. Indeed, it's a kind of a tautology, because that means that what is an essentially derived variety? It's a variety which is derived, of course, essentially from another one, and that, except for the differences resulting of the act of derivation, coincide with the original variety. That means it's the same, except for the differences. We need a little bit more clarity here.
Okay, I sense it's coming.
Indeed, we face a conundrum here, right? It's a difficult concept because we put together technical and legal notions that are difficult to reconcile, also because of the specific object of the protection, which is plant varieties, living organisms, and the way you can reach a new plant variety is multifaceted, I would say. Antonio, you talked of indeed the impact of new technologies, but still the classical crossing and selection remains, and I guess will remain with new technologies. We will see a combination of these tools in the future, and also from the SMEs. As you know, we have a lot of SMEs in this sector still active. Most of them are family business, are specialized since generations in certain crops. And the challenge I see is that, but this is true not only for plant variety rights, it's in general for IP. Many of these companies are not really investing the potential they have in intellectual property rights. And maybe this is also due to business models that in the different crops is very much different. You have a closer eye on the business models in the different sectors. Could you elaborate a little bit on your perception of the business when you think, for example, at vegetables or agriculture crops? What are the trends? Because I can share with you that there is a general trend to decrease the number of protected varieties in in general in the ornamental sector, in the vegetable sector, and even in the fruit sector. So do you have any insight from the business?
Yes, okay, I will try to do so. As far as I know, and to the better of my understanding, there is no reduction in the efforts by plant breeders to continue innovating and developing new varieties that could solve the many challenges we are facing all along the value chain, from farmers to retailers, consumers, etc. So if there is, I my hope is that this negative trend that you mentioned is purely temporary, and I don't think that it's going to be consolidated, at least for the crops we are dealing with. We are less familiar to ornamentals, which is clearly a niche and a very peculiar niche, and then different of the other crops, like field crops, cereals, fruits, vegetables, etc., that we are working much more intensively. Then what we see is that it depends. I think that in some cases, the problem or the challenge to apply for protection is not the business model, but the pace of innovation. In vegetables, for example, in some crops, we see that the commercial life of some varieties is so short, even 4 or 5 years only, that breeders don't see the utility of applying for plant variety protection, because in 4 years, 5 years, the variety very likely is going to be replaced by another. So there is no material time for competitors or even for growers or farmers to start commercially using that variety without authorization of the plant breeders. In other crops like fruits, I say that the reasons could be different, and there it's more related to the business model and to some limits that we see in the UPOP system, and namely it is the protection along the value chain. We have been talking before about EDBs. EDBs is a challenge, but it's a typical horizontal issue between the breeders, between competitors. But I'm talking now is a vertical issue along the value chain. And there, infringements continue being the main challenge, especially in non-EU countries. And then what we see is that there are some limitations in the current scope of the plant variety rights, and that some big concept for an efficient enforcement of plant variety rights remain. For example, the concept of unauthorized use. What is unauthorized use? Second point would be provisional protection. It means for fruit trees, for example, the lapse of time in between application and granting of the plant variety rights, it takes several years, sometimes 5, 6, or even more years. During that time, if there is no clear protection of the plant breeders' rights, the breeders could be reluctant to quickly release the variety and then go to the market, because they could see that there are major risks of losing the control, especially after we have been very critical on that, but the interpretation given by the European Court of Justice in the so-called Nadocot case. And finally, last but not least, clarity on the rules of enforcement for the rights on harvested material, which is a very important issue. We have also to understand, finally, that in those crops, fruit, but also vegetables, all the added value is in the final product. So that means that we are seeing in the last years that more and more actors along the value chain, and not the traditional ones, I mean the propagators, multiplicators like the nurseries or the plant raisers, are going to the breeders asking for a license. No, it is even the retailers or other parts of the chain who want to capture the add value provided by the new varieties, and then to ensure that they could produce in advantageous and more advantageous, commercially advantageous way.
Indeed, Antonio, you are mentioning some critical issues that animate the debate on how we could develop further the plant variety rights system in Europe, but not only, even beyond. And when you speak of the challenges in terms of, for example, making the whole mechanism, the whole process for protecting fruits varieties, this is something which is very important for us to reflect upon, because, as you know, DUS testing, so this DUS means distinctness, uniformity, and stability, which is the technical examination of plant varieties that we do with examination offices. And we know that for fruit species, it takes longer because of requirements, technical requirements to put in the soil a new variety. On the one side, we have to make sure that the work is done as quickly as possible. On the other side, the breeders, need a good result, a reliable DUS testing report, and finally a good variety description. Otherwise, enforcement of the rights would be even more challenging and complicated. So we strive here to find the right balance between securing a good DUS testing with reliable result. And in that respect, could we say that 2 years or 3 years it's enough? Or should we go for systematically for a 4th year of testing in order to be sure? Because we don't have to forget that we deal with something which is living organism. So we have to discard any possibility of impact and interaction on the environment, on the variety, and at the same time make it sustainable and adequate to the expectations of the breeders. So for the value chain to be strong, from the perspective of the CPVO and the managing of the system, this is one of the, I would say, biggest challenge also in terms of harmonization of practices with our network of examination office.
Oh, that's I fully agree what you say. Don't forget that we are talking about a legal system which has become pretty old already. And I mean, the current UPOV convention is 30 years old. And the community more than 30 years old. And the current community plant variety rights system, although updated in some minor administrative issues, etc., but remain the same. But during those 30 years, technology has evolved immensely. So I think that we have to reflect on that, and that's the if we really want to get an efficient IP system for plants, that has to be adapted to the state of the art and the technologies used by breeders. And I fully agree. This is, to me, the main challenge. And I think that this is what we have to focus in the coming years, because also, and here I can speak on behalf of the entire sector, plant breeders consider the UPOP system as the best system that better fit with the needs and the work and to protect the interests. And we also consider from within the UPOP system the community plant variety rights system as one of the best standards worldwide. But that said, what we are seeing is that new challenges are coming. For example, what we were talking about before on NGTs and the problem, but also on the because we are now dealing with a market which is fully globalized. So in many cases, the varieties that are protected here in Europe are going to be exploited, planted, and put it under production in third countries in another hemisphere, and what with much less efficient plant variety weight system, but they harvested material, the final product, and then coming back to Europe, to the European market and to the European consumers. And we have to realize that, to understand that, if we really want to keep that system efficient.
Okay. Well, Antonio, thank you for your insights. Francesco, thank you as well. We are slowly reaching the time that we allocated ourselves to this chat. But before we leave, we talked about the past, the future, the changes, legislative changes, technological advancements. Are there any upcoming projects or initiatives that Anove and CPVO will be working together?
Absolutely. There have been many examples of collaboration in the past, starting around 20 years ago with the first seminar on enforcement of community plant variety right that was developed by the CPVO already in 2005, and followed by a second one in Madrid in 2007. And enforcement has been one of the areas that we have worked more closely and in Anove with the CPVO. A very good example that I would like to mention here was the development of a DNA database that was incorporated by Anove in collaboration with IRTA, Public Research Institute owned by the government of Catalonia, 20 years ago, and to support breeders in variety identification for enforcement purposes. I would like to remind that the project was fully supported by CPVO, allowing us to build a database with DNA samples collected from official collections that were managed by the examination officers. And I think that's the support, active support by CPVO was enormously important and made the product much more robust. Another example in the same area, and we are now ending the agenda, the logistic for training activity and in the next spring with enforcement bodies, in this case with the police and from Italy, that are going to come to Spain to learn more about plant breeders, about the challenges, also to discuss the legal issues, which is also a very important area in our activity, and that is also going to be supported and by the CPVO with the active participation of the president and another part of the staff. And I also want to make use of this to really helpfully thank you for this support.
Indeed, Antonio, the pleasure is ours. So you tackle two important areas of development. So R&D projects. We have a strategy on co-founding projects that can have an impact in the testing of varieties and also for the enforcement of varieties. So the project that was mentioned is one of these important examples. So R&D, we believe that we have to continue fostering the cooperation with national authorities and make available funding for these activities. And the other important areas is enforcement Obviously, enforcement is the responsibility of title holders, of the breeders. However, I do believe that an agency like the CPVO has a role to play in facilitating knowledge sharing, training, and in doing so, the collaboration with national associations such as Anove is very important. In the past, we also made joint activities for judges and public prosecutors in Spain, and I believe that we will have to continue doing that. And finally, I would also strengthen the importance of supporting breeders by making available funds, such as the tool that the Commission has made available through the so-called SME Fund, which provide 75% of the fees that must be paid by breeders in order to protect new plant varieties with the CPVO. So we are promoting very actively this instrument to support plant breeders.
Before ending today's episode, I would like to express my gratitude to our guests for their insights. To you, our listeners, thank you for spending this time with us. I'm Alessio De Laurentiis, reminding you to join us next time for more engaging discussions. The music you're listening to is by Jazzcopo, a Lombardi and Amoruso production.